Hey, welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new. My name is Chris, and today we are going to talk about astrology. I love astrology. It's honestly one of my favorite things to talk about. I could talk about astrology all day. It's so complex and just so fun to dive into. So yeah, let's get into it. Today I want to talk about how we've been taught astrology totally wrong. Growing up, we just say oh, what's your sign? And essentially we tell each other our sun signs, and that's still true. But we have all these different signs that we were not taught about growing up. A lot of people are still learning, and it's become a very increasingly popular over the last, I'd say 4 to 5 years for sure. And so today I just want to talk about the real astrology, and it's been around for a long time now. It just hasn't been super emphasized within our society. It's very occult, of course, and just very hidden knowledge. So we have all these different signs. So we think we're just one sign, like I was saying, and we literally have 24 signs. I'm not even kidding. Just from your birth chart without the time that you were born alone has 12 signs. And then when you have your birth time, which tells you your ascendant, that gives you a whole other set of signs, because you basically have houses. And I'll get into that too once we talk about the ascendant. But that's a whole other set of 12 signs. So essentially we're all made out of all the energies of the zodiac. Is just manifested and expressed in different ways. And that's why two people of the same sign can be we're not the same at all. Or one person, even if they're born on the same day, essentially they have to be different years for the most part for this. But it can also just depend, because their moon sign could be different and their ascendant sign can be different. But this is why one person might feel oh, I'm such this sign, and maybe this person that has the same birthday, they might be I'm literally not like that at all. So these reasons that I'm gonna go over are exactly why we can just see so many different variations and opinions and things like that when it comes to astrology. So like I was saying, we have all these different signs, and how this comes about is the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, we all know the planets. When we're born, wherever they're at in the zodiac constellation is literally imprinted on us. So when we're crossed over from fully crossed over from our mother's womb and the spirit realm, and totally immersed in this material 3D world, whatever time and space that we come out, wherever the planets are out, is literally going to imprint and reflect back to us within our personalities. So let's say the sun was in Cancer when you were born, and the moon was in Capricorn. They're totally opposite signs, and so that's pretty much where we get each of these signs, where they're all placed and they're all born. So wherever the sun is, wherever the moon is, wherever Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, wherever all of these wherever all these planets are when we're born, is literally our birth chart. Not just scratching the surface though, because there's progressions, and we'll get into that later. So so your sun sign is literally your everyday personality. It's just your basic nature, your basic personality. It's kind of this energy that you kind of carry throughout your everyday, you know what I mean? And it can be heavily impacted, honestly, by your moon sign and your Mercury sign. So as far as your moon sign is your moods and your emotions. And so it can be very different than your sun sign, but essentially they go together very hand in hand, because even though your sun sign is representative of the energy that you feel throughout your everyday, your moon is also there every day, because all the signs are, but you know what I mean? It's very it's very heavily impacted in your personality, because your moods and your emotions are something that you're constantly like feeling and, you know, flowing through. So the two of them are really, really important for like understanding, you know, your energy. And a lot of the times when someone like doesn't feel like their sun sign, like they're like, I'm not a Libra, or I'm not a Virgo, or like I don't feel like one, it can very much be their moon sign that's like overpowering their sun sign. That's very much a thing. So your Mercury sign is how you think and how you communicate, which is also super important, because so let's say you're born on a cusp. A cusp is when a planet is basically in between two signs. Like I would say more or less about 3 degrees at the end of a sign and 3 degrees in the beginning of the next sign is the cusp. So let's say you're born on a cusp, right? And let's say you are 28 degrees Taurus. So your sun sign is literally like 2 degrees essentially from moving into Gemini. And let's say your Mercury's in Gemini. A lot of the time, depending on your moon sign, because if your moon sign is Taurus, then it might cancel that out. But let's say your moon sign is Libra. So let's say you're a Taurus sun with a Libra moon, and you're on the cusp still, but your Mercury's in Gemini. You're going to gravitate more towards that air energy, because your moon is air sign and your Mercury is air sign, versus like that Taurus sun. And that Taurus sun will be there most definitely, but you'll probably feel more of like an air sign versus a Taurus. And like you'll still have that like grounded nature, that very sensual, you know, very loyal, loving nature to you, you know, because that's your sun, that's your basic personality. So it's always going to be there. But like your moods, your emotions, your Mercury can totally take over your sun sign. So that's why Mercury is super important, because your Mercury is literally how you process information that comes in, how you think about things, and then how you communicate it back, if you even communicate. Because like, for example, if you have a Mercury in Scorpio, communication is not as like simple or easy as someone with like a Mercury in Gemini, because Mercury is like home in Gemini. So essentially it would be a lot easier for someone with a Mercury in Gemini to communicate very naturally, very effortlessly, versus someone with a Mercury in Scorpio. But like I said, those can be balanced out, because like, let's say if, you know, someone has a Libra sun, Gemini moon, Mercury Scorpio, then they might be a little bit better with their communication. So it can just depend, and especially on their life circumstances, because, you know, I truly feel like our life circumstances still play a major role in how, you know, we express and develop all of these signs, because there is underdeveloped traits of each sign, but also like developed and evolved traits of each sign, and that plays like a major factor as well. So just to like move on, you know, through the signs. So your Venus sign is how you love. It's what you're attracted to, it's what you value, it's how you like to give love, but it's also how you like to receive love. So wherever Venus is at when you're born is your Venus sign. And that's also a really, really important sign in your birth chart. All of these honestly are like very, very reflective of our direct personality. The sun through the Mars. So your sun, your moon, your Mercury, your Venus, and your Mars, and your Ascendant, which isn't an outer planet, but like as far as the planets, sun through Mars are super, super important. So if you really, really want to know and understand like your energy, totally study your sun through your Mars. Like I would honestly start with those. And once you really get the hang of those, yeah, then I would say totally dive deeper in, because once you start getting the hang of it, everything starts connecting, because astrology is like a science. It's like an art and a science. And so at first it's totally like another language. You're like, what is this? Like, it's really hard to understand. Like I was so confused. I literally read my birth chart at least 3 times before it really started to click. Like the first time I read it, I was like, okay, this makes sense. But then as I really kept reading it, I was like, whoa. Like I totally encourage you to read it over and over and over and over until it has that like, whoa, you know, if you don't get that the first time. But yeah, so just to continue on, you know, so your Venus sign is super important, because it's literally how you process what you value in life and your friendships, and like what you like to receive, you know, from people and from yourself at the same time. Like, it's also descriptive of how you love yourself. And so yeah, Venus is super important. I love Venus. Continuing on, our Mars sign is so complex, but it's a beautiful complex, because Mars is like very descriptive of your animalistic nature. It's literally like, so when you have a desire for something, you're ambitious, you're driven, you're like, I want this. You know what you want. Your Mars describes how you actually go after that, how you literally physically go get the things that you want in life. And this is so key, because if you have a Mars placement that is supportive of Mars, because Mars is it's ruled by Aries, so it's fire. So if you have a Mars in like air or really fire, it's really easy to like tap into like what you want and to go do it, and not just keep thinking about it, you know? And so yeah, so that's like really important. Your Mars is super important, and not only does it show how you go after what you want, but it's also very descriptive of how you show your aggression, like different than your moon sign. Your moon is like literally like your emotions, you know, and like how you feel about things. But your Mars is like how you assert yourself, how you might show your aggression if someone's starting to step on your toes, you know. It's like how you start like, okay, you know, back up, like, you know, like, all right, you know, that's literally like your Mars. And so it's totally different than your moon sign, because your moon is like kind of like you're already in your emotions now. Your Mars is almost like your little warning, like, I'm warning you, like you're pushing my buttons, you know. So that's your Mars. And so before I go on to the other planets, I do want to say that what else can change like how a planet is expressed and within yourself and in your chart is retrogrades. So I'm sure like a lot of people hear about this, like there's a Mercury retrograde or a Venus retrograde or Jupiter retrograde or whatever, you know, whatever you hear. What that means is like if you have like, and you'll know because there'll be like an R next to like your Mercury sign or your Venus, your sun and your moon sign can never go retrograde. So what happens when a planet goes retrograde is that from Earth, it looks like the planet, like normally, like let's say the planet looks like it's going this way. When it's in retrograde, it literally like it's going backwards from Earth, and it's essentially just an illusion. But like the way that the energy is flowing through the planet, it makes us internalize that energy versus expressing it outwards. So if you're born, like let's say you're born next to your Mercury, you have an R. That means when you were born, Mercury was in retrograde, and that's going to carry with you throughout your whole life. So a lot of the times with Mercury retrogrades, I see when I do people's birth charts, like they're either, it usually expresses in a way of like, it's hard for them to communicate, you know, because Mercury is communication. And if it's retrograde, then that means it's not being outwardly expressed in its like normal way. You're internalizing your thoughts and your communication. And so that's huge, because I've been able to help a lot of people see that like it might be harder for them to catch on to things like mentally because their Mercury's in retrograde, or it's like even harder for them to communicate because their Mercury's in retrograde. And so, you know, like I was saying, your sun and your moon can never be in retrograde, but your Mercury can, your Venus can, your Mars can. So like if you have a Venus retrograde, that makes it, your thoughts of love and like expressing love is different than like the norm would be, because you're internalizing that energy, and the way that you're processing it is totally different than people that have a Venus that's direct. And same thing with Mars. Like if you have a Mars retrograde, it's going to be harder for you to go after like your desires and your achievements and like or assert yourself. So it's like it can just show in so many different ways. And so once again, you know, that's when you have like an R next to that planet. If you have an R next to a planet, it can be Jupiter too. It can be any of your outer planets. That's how you know you have a retrograde. And so just to like wrap up Mars, because I know I went into the retrogrades, just to wrap up Mars, Mars can also represent your sex drive, and like how you go after sex when you want it, when you're in the bed or whatever, you know. And I think that's super important too, because it goes really well with like your Venus sign. So if you're doing like a compatibility, like looking at how your Mars connects with their Venus is super important. And I also like to look at how Mars connects with the moon, because, you know, your moon sign is it's your moods, you know, it's your mood can affect how you go after things. Or even if it's like the emotional side of your moon sign, your emotions can still affect how you go after, you know, what you want, how you take action and be very direct about things. And so this is essentially like the real astrology. We have all these different signs. Like your Jupiter sign is like your sign of expansion and higher learning and how you achieve abundance. And your Saturn sign is like your discipline, your fears, how you restrict yourself. And if you have a Saturn retrograde, that's super important to look into, because essentially like it's harder to be disciplined and it's harder to just handle your responsibilities. And I always try to point that out, like when I'm doing a birth chart specifically, like that Saturn retrograde can be very hard. And knowing it and being aware of it can just make it so much easier, you know, to move beyond, you know, the limitations that it just naturally places on you, and how you know, how you move about life. And so Uranus is like your innovation, it's like technology, how you set yourself apart. Your Neptune is very reflective of like your subconscious, your intuition, your dreams. These are generational things as well. So like your Jupiter through Pluto are all generational things. And that's also why we feel so connected to people that were born in the same year as us, or maybe someone that's like a year or two, maybe even 3 or 4. It just depends, because the outer planets move a lot slower, like 7 or 15 years. So they'll literally be in the same sign for like 7 or 15 years, just depending on which outer planet is. Whereas the sun sign changes every 30 days. The moon sign changes like every 2.5 to 3 days, you know. So that's why like generations just think the same way, or like, you know, have the same perception of things, go after things the same way. That's totally why, like why millennials are so different than our parents, because our signs, our outer planets are totally different than theirs. Yeah, so that's like essentially how this all works. And then just briefly, I just want to end with your ascendant sign. And your ascendant sign is really, really important. And that's the sign that you need your birth time for. So if someone ever asks you for your birth time, that's because they're trying to get your ascendant. And or they might just want to like have a very accurate representation of your chart. But most times than not, they probably want your ascendant. So your ascendant sign is super important, because it's how you present yourself to the world. It's like that first impression, like when you're first meeting someone, or first around someone after a long time, and you feel yourself presenting yourself in a different energy, maybe than your moon. You might not be conscious of it, but like versus like when you're comfortable, like you present yourself different when you're comfortable with someone versus like someone new or someone you haven't seen in a long time. And that's your ascendant sign. And your ascendant sign is super, super important, because it's so reflective of literally like how you put yourself out there, like how you want to be perceived by people. It's so deep. It's reflective of how you present yourself, like the clothes you wear, your hair, like if you even care about your hair. Like it literally describes all of that. It's very reflective of your physical nature. So like I'm a Leo rising, and I know that Leo risings, like we typically like to have big hair. We like to have, our hair is super important to us, period. And we typically have broader shoulders, but we like present ourselves in like very composed, like regal, like lion-like ways, you know? And so once you have your ascendant, you get your houses, and your houses literally talk about so many different things of your life. It's like your blueprint of your life. It talks about your money, like how you go about money, how you perceive like family and your roots, your everyday routine and activities. It talks about how you view long-term partners. It gets deep. It literally goes into your career, how people will see you career-wise, but also like what you want through your career, how you rebirth yourself, how you want to raise your kids. It gets super intense and very, very accurate. So yeah, I just wanted to like make this video about how we've been taught astrology so wrong, and it's so complex and it's so deep, and it's literally a science and an art, and it's something that I love, and I think it's so important for us to tap into, because it explains everything about your nature, not your nurture, but your nature. You already know your nurture, but we don't all know our nature. And so it's almost like a fast track to truly understanding yourself and like getting ahead of, you know, maybe your limitations, or like where you're held back and you might not understand why or how. And it really just helps you to like have so much compassion for yourself, and yeah, just be able to like really do what you need to do to take off, to be where you want to be in life. It's so important. So yeah, this is my video on astrology, and I'm going to be posting a lot of videos about each sign, like each sun sign, each moon sign, each Mercury, each Venus. So yeah, keep coming back, keep checking, and eventually I'm going to get into all the outer planets, the ascendants. So yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of astrology on here. So I'll see you next time.